yourself when you start, limit your comments and obviously keep them to the topic at hand and avoid digressing too far. Let's see. I would ask the commission members if we want to go ahead and for this Zoom meeting and future Zoom meetings to make a motion to limit public comment to 3 minutes, and then we will vote on that. So do I have a motion?
How'd you come up with 3 minutes? How's that a good number? Is that experience from?
That's what the Common Council uses.
It is? Okay. I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have motion and a second. All those in favor signify by waving your hand.
Aye.
Okay, we got a majority, or we've got the 5 commission members. All right.
I have a logistical question.
Yes.
I have, Aaron, this is for you. I have the PDF you sent open,
Yes.
but it's not all of the background and all of the details of drawings and all. Is that correct? Like
The presentation or the packet?
well, that's, I guess, the question is I have open a PDF that has 56 slides.
Okay, that's the PowerPoint.
That's the PowerPoint presentation.
Okay, so should I close that out? And
I will be sharing that in a moment once we get to the actual application presentation of the proposals. But that was, I sent it just in case for whatever reason anyone had any technical issues.
Oh, okay, but we should.
I will
be.
be sharing that tonight. Yep.
And
we'll
I
have
should go open the packet, not this PowerPoint then, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's more information in the packet.
Yes. Yep. Okay.
Okay. Okay, I think I've gone through all of our procedural items. Anyone who does make a comment when we open it up to public comment, I would ask that you identify yourself and then proceed with your comment. I will then call the first item, which is 33 Alexander Street, represented by the Albany County Land Bank, to present the case for the certificate of appropriateness to demolish a vacant 2-story wood frame structure.
You want me to jump in or?
Yeah, also, if you could, well, give us a little bit of the background and the history. I'm particularly interested in the one of the items in your project information that said you've owned the building since February of 2015, and it understandably continued to deteriorate, but during the winter of 2018-19, a roof hatch was left open. So I'm concerned that further deterioration was a result of that unseen action within the building. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Yes, sure. So 33 Alexander Street, it is one of the original group of buildings that came to the land bank. So it's been with us since the very beginning. Over the course of that time, we attempted a stabilization on the building while trying to market it and try to find an appropriate buyer for this particular structure. That particular thing that you're mentioning about the roof hatch is an issue, but surely not the only issue. That often happens, unfortunately, when we have folks that shouldn't be in our buildings access our buildings to, go in and see what they can find. The roof hatch, unfortunately, is one way that folks go in. So that did happen, but this building came to us in very poor condition. I have been in this building many times over the course of it being in Land Bank inventory. Even when we originally got it, there were major deficiencies in the particular building. Primary concern, the facade, unfortunately, is separating from the main structure of the building. There was also a newer rear addition that was put on the back, which has not the greatest design features for roofs with winters. That back section, even in the beginning, was almost inaccessible because of the way that the floors were damaged and you couldn't really walk through them. That being said, we did still try to do a stabilization. We worked to basically tie the facade back to the main structure because we didn't want that facade to come off the building and cause an issue. We went through various steps, the regular marketing, website. We worked to try to have it presented as a group of buildings where people could tour them, come in, take a look at them, looking at scopes of work and that kind of information to help people along with the project. Unfortunately, to date, we have had no viable applicants step forward to be able to take on this project at this size and scale. And at this point, it's really unsustainable for us to try to continue to do more stabilization work on this particular building. And so that is why we're asking for permission to go ahead and demolish the building.
Was any consideration given to limiting the demolition to the rear portions, which are certainly well beyond any sort of reclamation, with the notion that the original front section could be, I guess, stabilized and then marketed?
Unfortunately, at this point, because we already did a stabilization, doing a partial demolition, and since both the front and the rear of the building really are greatly affected, I think that front facade becomes something that's insurmountable for most people when they look at it. We don't believe that would make the difference to give this a viable pathway.
Okay, I'll ask other commission members to comment on the application.
How often does the land bank inspect its properties? It says the roof hatch was open and not closed in the winter of 2018 and not closed until spring of 2019. Does the land bank look at its properties regularly, or?
Yes, we have a regular schedule of going through properties. I'm not sure when where those exact dates came from. Obviously, if we're made aware of a situation or we find something, we would correct that immediately. We don't have any intention of leaving those things, that way.
So we assume that there was deterioration from the winter, but that's not necessarily an exact date. But what did happen at winter is we did bank these properties to look at possible projects for a larger section of the south end. So the next time we positively had showings and opened up the building again was for our rehabilitation fair in the south end. And that's when we caught it.
Okay, the information that's been presented is representing the structural condition of the building, also the rehabilitation cost, of the building has been estimated as exceeding any sort of expectation of resale of the building. Again, I'm asking other commissioners if they'd like to make further comments or observations.
I agree. It would have been nice if the attachment behind was taken away and then we looked at the front of the building, but it looks like it's too late.
I'd like to understand more about what was done. It said the land bank you tied the facade back to the main structure as part of a stabilization. And then I see in the report from CT Mail that it's being temporarily restrained by wooden diagonal bracing. Did the land bank investigate the cause of that facade issue and seek to repair the cause of the facade issue?
We just stabilized the framing. So no, we didn't go in and do additional work on any of the internal drains or the roof.
Okay, so you spent the money on stabilizing the facade temporarily without fixing the underlying problem that was causing the facade to pull away from the building, which is in the roof and the drains. Is it in the roof and the drains? One would assume so.
I would think there probably is something there in the front, but it's that whole front section is just really heavily dry rotted. It was that way when we got the building.
So when the money was spent to temporarily stabilize, when these pieces of wood were put into the interior, there was no discussion about, has any work been done on the roof at all? Any temporary roofing material put over, any flashing? Has anything been done on the roof?
No, the roof was not done.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think the problem is, for me, is that it's a bit of an extension of the stabilization demolition presentation we had at our last meeting. And so we've got what Aaron was just speaking to. We've got a partial stabilization that didn't address we think, a primary cause of the ongoing deterioration. So those two things don't feel connected. There's a disconnect there. We just keep losing buildings. That's kind of a general concern. And the cost to rehab is problematic in my mind because it doesn't feel very sincere, in that there are other financial resources, and that if we collectively were really looking to rehabilitate this building, that's a big spread, 150 to 250. It's not, so that's a big spread. It's hard to imagine that a real cost estimate was done if it's got such a spread represented there. But the other is, there are programs that the South End Improvement Corp has. The Housing Trust Funds, there's 80,000 here. There's the city's 50,000 vacant building funds. There's the tax credits. And if you're of a lower income, those funds at the state will be returned in a check. So just as we saw last week when we were presented the cost of demolition or the cost of stabilization, it was incomplete, and therefore, frankly, didn't really feel like a true comparison that enabled me to say, oh, well, yeah, this is really not able to be viable. Because if you had a $150,000 project here, and you were able to use some of those funds through the South End Improvement Corp, there's $80,000, you had $50,000 from the city, you've got some tax credits, all of a sudden you've got a project and you've got some assets that the owner is building up. So
I can speak to that spread, and that is exactly where it comes from. So the lower end is with the sense that an individual would take on this building and go down that sort of path where they put together different sort of resources or even their own resources. The higher end of the spread comes from our experience when we pay for things. And unfortunately, the reality is if the land bank does it, it costs more money. That's just what happens. We understand that. And we know that if we do a full rehab on a building, it will cost us more money because we have a higher overhead. We're going to be hiring a GC to do it. We can't do all of our construction project management in-house. So if we were to do it all the way to the finish line, we're going to be at that higher end. But if somebody else can take it on, they can do some of it, sweat equity, they can do some of their own work themselves, and not have to be going out to bid in the regular market, then we agree it could be done cheaper. But we don't have that person, we don't have that partner to walk that path with.
Are you on prevailing, do you have to pay prevailing wage rates on your projects?
We do not pay prevailing wage, but our projects consistently come in more expensive than, what other folks can do. They're doing a lot of their own project management, or if they even do parts of the job themselves, they can save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Has the land bank done I get that what we're looking at from CTML is a prioritized conditions assessment. I believe Historic Albany worked with you maybe on a conditions report. Are you in possession of a prioritized rehab plan or condition report with priorities for repair? Because I'm going back to, I don't know, it'd be interesting to know how much was spent on this temporary stabilization on the interior. You're looking at the demolition cost, and to Marilyn's point, this was a little bit of the issue systemically, which I know is not you're not responsible for systemic issues, but we're talking about full rehab cost, but has the land bank done anything besides this temporary stabilization, which isn't going to help a future owner, to improve the condition of this building, to invest something to stabilize the building somewhat? So if whatever you would take in to put in this temporary stabilization, like 25 to 35,000 you're going to spend to demolish it, have somebody look at the building. If you put a new roof on the building, will you buy it more time and you can button it up? It's not the cost of full rehab. It should be the cost of mothballing and stabilizing so that you don't have to worry about it. It doesn't become an emergency demolition. That's this, I feel, difference in people wanting to demolish buildings because they're looking at the full move-in ready rehab cost and not looking at what it takes to stabilize and mothball a building, which does not mean filling it with wood on the inside. So
I would love to try to find a solution for flat roofs and internal roof drains. We have gone down the path of replacing roofs on buildings. And unfortunately, what we found is if the building is not heated and occupied and has an internal roof drain, that is a very, very temporary solution. We see problems come up within a year or two of doing that kind of work, which then it becomes, if we spend $25,000, because we will, if we abate a roof and then have to put a new one on and then do all the drain work, we might be back in a year having the same conversation. So for us, it's very difficult to make those decisions on how you're going to do that. And what we have to focus on is when we have a viable pathway to get it across the finish line, because we can't spend $25,000 every 2 years to try to keep it limping along. There just isn't the money available to do that.
So the land bank has seen, you've put a new roof on a building and you've seen that roof fail in 2 years because of the internal roof drain.
It will start to fail at the drain. Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
so you've seen that happen with the buildings that you've mothballed.
Yes, I have absolutely seen it happen. As soon as they freeze, the drains break and then they leak at the drain.
Have you developed any, I mean, can you get heat trace on some of those?
I would love to have someone come up with that kind of, some sort of technology, maybe a solar panel. I don't know, assuming that it doesn't get stolen, some kind of way to do that. I don't know who we could ask. Maybe one of the architectural schools, maybe one of the engineering schools could come up with something, but I don't know how you do it when you don't have power to keep that problem from occurring.
Have you talked to, I'm just trying to think, I mean, there's so many vacant in other places even, you know, if this is not a solvable problem within the Albany Collective Preservation Architecture Community Brain Trust to come up with a solution on the internal roof drains, there's got to be other places where they've come up with such a solution. Because this can't be, you know, I've seen buildings that have been mothballed that don't have electricity that aren't immediately failing. So I'm trying to think of what the.
Yeah, we've talked to other land banks about it. We don't really have good comparisons because we have the unique, well, in this case, not a row house, but a lot of our buildings are row house buildings. You know, and a lot of the other land banks are basically dealing with gable roofs and, you know, independent structures, which we see it every day when we get a new round of properties. We'll see buildings that are lucky enough to have a gable roof, and generally they're in better condition than anything we get with a flat roof. I don't know. I would love to talk to anyone who has ideas. It would be great if we could find some way to do that. And like I said, get power to it is a big part of the problem. Yeah. It would help immensely.
Have you talked to Newburgh? What does Newburgh do?
They are not doing any kind of tracing or anything like that that I know of specifically. No.
But they're finding a way to. I mean, how are they maintaining their buildings with flat roofs and internal roof drains that don't have power?
I don't know that specifically. I haven't asked her that question or asked them that question.
I just wanted to add something that hasn't come up. Just looking at the value of the improved structures on this block of Alexander Street, with the exception of the recent infill habitat houses, the improved values are between $50,000 and $75,000. So I think part of the answer is we simply can't let a building get in this condition in these neighborhoods where land values are that and property values are that low, because it's very hard to bring it back.
Well, I think part of the problem is that these buildings are now, I mean, I agree, and I think everybody agrees with that, but now these buildings are in this condition. If we demolish them all, then we won't have, it'll make our jobs really easy because we won't have a historic district anymore. And I think we all know across the board that in neighborhoods with, you know, diminished property values, the cost of rehab is going to exceed the market value if you're looking at that kind of comparison. But that's why the incentives are in place. I mean, pick a city, and rehabs in neighborhoods like the South End are more expensive than the market value, but they're being done. And that's why we have the low-income housing tax credit. That's why we have the historic tax credit. That's why we have all the programs that Marilyn just mentioned. And I don't know if anyone's done a pro forma on it where you look at the rehab cost and then the debt service and what it would, you know, what kind of rent you could get, and, you know, looking at the investment of it. That might be a more interesting comparison if you're looking at, you know, $150,000, you know, could you get rents back on it? There's got to be more. I mean, this is a perpetual issue all over, not just in Albany in terms of rehab cost. But if that's going to be our argument, then we're going to lose every vacant building in the South End.
No, yeah, my intent wasn't to be dismissive. I just, you know, I guess it probably should be approached as a public project from the outset. I think the idea of potentially waiting for a private investor to come in and invest in the property to inevitably have a loss, unless they're going to live there, and there are those suggestions. So, I mean, those, I think, you're right. I mean, we need to do a better job of identifying what the solutions are earlier in the process. And I think that goes to Land Bank too, and we can try to work with them. But I just wanted to make that point with respect to land values because it hadn't come up.
Thank you.
I'd like to ask, and Amanda, you have such a tough job. I am so empathetic and I'm so impressed each time I've been on site with you. So these are really, really tough, and I understand that. But what I'd like to ask, what the other land banks are doing around this, what would tracing just to get heat where we need it, any other options, and most important, what would $35,000 or $40,000 really buy us in terms of stabilizing the building? So the fact that we might be back here in 2 years with the same request, that's not good. And that means that we didn't do, I argue that we didn't do a good enough job putting all of our collective resources together to get someone there. So the idea that we might come back because it's just status quo and we're all going to work on our own little worlds and that's the way it is, I don't think that's a solid reason to permit this demolition to occur. So I guess the question is, can we find out for any vulnerable buildings? And it's not just flat, I mean, it's certainly flat roof buildings, but any building with that, with an internal gutter of some sort has the same challenge. So what are they doing in Buffalo? What are they doing in Newburgh? What are they doing in Syracuse specifically around this issue? Number one, and number two, this cost of demolition, this $35,000 or $40,000, what can we get relative to stabilizing this property? And even if somehow $5,000 of it is creatively used for a whole different approach to marketing it, or bringing in someone to package a whole financial set of possibilities for that project. How do we take that $35,000, $40,000 and use it to save this building and put all of our resources together so we don't get it back in 2 years? It's just a recurring problem, and I don't think I'm ready to let it go based on the information that I have in front of me. I think we can do better collectively, and I don't think we're there. I think we're just working too independently and too narrowly. It's a real problem for you all. I get that, but that's a lot of money to demolish a building, and then we don't have the building. So how else can we maybe use that pretty substantial amount of funding to get us over this hump? So I guess I have a motion in there. I don't.
Yeah, I guess I would just reiterate that, we are always more than happy to, work with anyone and everyone. This was actually part of we did a walking tour with Historic Albany, and this was a part of that as an initiative to try to come up with, other ideas. We're open to ideas. If you have someone who's interested in this building and wants to take it on, we can start that conversation. But at this point, we've had no one step forward.
And I think what I was hearing from Marilyn, and I know what I feel, and I want to also second Marilyn's appreciation of your work and your job. And but I think that it's clear that what's been happening with marketing this building is not working. And so to her point, look at the cost of demolition that the land bank was going to invest and what can be done, because leaving the building as it is, it doesn't look like anyone's interested. And, you know, doing something to fix the ongoing dynamic deterioration that's occurring. Is there something that can be done? Is there a resource that we here don't know about that can help solve that internal roof drain problem? You know, can you put a new roof on it? Can you, you know, where you can get into the building? I understand there's unstable floors, but can you clean out what you can clean out? I mean, make it presentable and invest money in something that will be longer term than bracing that, of course, is going to have to come down and add to the cost of whatever else is, you know, the future owner is going to need to invest.
We cannot go down the path of further stabilization or full rehab with this building without having a partner to do it with. So the answer to that is no, we can't do that.
So the land bank can't take the money it's putting into demolition and
Well,
invest it.
we've already done a grant-based stabilization on this project, and we're not allowed to do another one. So no, the answer unfortunately is no. We would have
How
to have
much-
some partner.
How much, you said it's grant-based stabilization. What's that grant from?
It's from our Attorney General money is where the stabilization and demolition, and we also do lot improvement work with that money.
Do those are state funds, right? Are they state funds?
They come from the Attorney General's office.
So does SHPO have a review on that, on how the land bank's using the Attorney General grant funds?
Yes, we put in SHPO applications. We're required to do phase ones or NEPA studies on each of the projects.
And does SHPO have any feedback on the longevity of the stabilization? So when they're looking at it, do you have conversations with SHPO about that, about Attorney General funds being used for a purely temporary stabilization?
Yeah, well, yes, we put in applications to SHPO if we're doing stabilizations, so we'll also do it for demolitions. We do it for each of those activities.
They
Okay.
get a application per building, or is it under all a big MOA, a memorandum of agreement?
No, we do it per building.
We do it per building.
Every single building has to have an application processed on it.
So they're not, is it a discussion or is it just an approval? Do they have any feedback on the longevity?
Sometimes they ask additional questions or, but generally, I'll be quite honest, generally, if it's a stabilization work, we present what we're doing in the plan, and that's generally a very quick turnaround.
Interesting.
Erin and Brad, what about the vacant buildings funds that the city has?
In terms of through ACDA,
That's the one that I know of. I don't know if there's any other sources.
I know that they have.
Do you want me to talk, Erin?
Go for it, Faye.
Hi, it's Faye from ACDA. We have 2 grants remaining for that program, but it's not a stabilization grant. So if somebody applies to us for funding to use that $50,000, they have to be able to show they have the remaining funds available to restore the building to its to a livable situation.
Well, we need to move this application to some level of conclusion here.
Somehow it's made it through the winter. So there's some time. I'm not sure what the emergency is that it has to be torn down in the next week or so.
I'm sorry, are you asking the question?
I'm just observing on it. You know, does it need a vote, tear it down right away? Or do we have time to look at this a little more?
well, we can certainly give you more information about what we've actually done, but I feel like it, the marketing and the time we've had it, that was included in the original application. So I'm not sure what other information that, we would provide at this point.
Well, what damage will occur in the next 30 or 60 days before it's torn down, for example?
I can't
Is it
begin to speculate on that.
Is it, it's not going to fall down and hurt somebody, most likely. It's been sitting there. How long has this been vacant?
Well, we've had it since 2015, so one can surmise that it was at least one tax cycle, probably multiples before that. So you can add on another 8 or 12 years on top of that.
I mean, it's on the outside, it looks good. It looks like it's an integral part of the neighborhood. Its loss will be felt as far as the streetscape of the whole neighborhood. I could see voting to tear it down in the very near future, but I don't see where it has to be done tomorrow. And I can think that we ought to study it a little bit longer, because it's not doing any harm to the land bank. It doesn't seem to be doing any damage to the neighborhood as long as it's secure. It's an interesting thing with these internal drains, because so many of these supposedly flat roofs are geared toward draining into the interior drain. Maybe there's some architectural way in which water could be stalled from going down through the walls and go off the back. I don't know, but it's the type of thing that, as we mentioned earlier, what do you do in a situation like this?
I thought about that, and actually that would require a bigger conversation and involve codes enforcement, because you would be in violation of code at that point. But
yes, it would be a violation of code, and it might be something that would take another month to think about, or maybe 2 months to think about. If at the end of it, the only solution is demolition, what harm has taken place? If this was a dire emergency that was going to fall down on the place next door, that's one thing. But if it's a case that another study and looking for options, this is apparently almost a universal problem for flat top buildings, for row houses. And would seem to be the prudent thing is to let us in the historic preservation community to look and see, maybe there's something we're missing. And if we demolish it right away, we may discover that through our own error, and it'll be too late. Once it's gone, it's gone. So I could see delaying the action for, we made it through the winter, and not to oversimplify it. And usually it's a little bit easier in the summer. And if we would go and take a look and see if there's any other options that we haven't thought of, whether that could be done rather than right now signing off on the eternal demolition of the building. Because I think it would be a missing tooth, not as much as in some neighborhoods, but it certainly takes the fabric of the neighborhood as opposed to just one individual building. Just a thought.
And I'd like to point out, I don't know if this was missed because there's some different dates here, but the survey, this is a pre-Civil War building, and the South End has lost a lot of its pre-Civil War era buildings. I don't know, I know Historic Albany did an oldest building survey some number of years ago. It would be interesting to know the percentage, but we might not even want to know the percentage because it's a lot of pre-Civil War era buildings, which other communities would be celebrating and marketing. And I feel like, to Commissioner McEnany's point, more could be done. I understand its marketing strategy has been on the land bank list. There's a virtual walkthrough and the rehab fair, but and maybe in the comments we'll hear from Historic Albany, and they can provide more information. But I think there's, to Jack's point, or Commissioner McNamee's point, it'd be really good to see.
So would we come back to the next meeting and hear your suggestions to solve that, or what your research has been, or how would that work?
Is
Well,
there a way?
there's a lot of it we can't solve. And so I think I'm very appreciative of Jack's suggestion that there's no emergency right here. Let's give it this is an important building on this street, and there's a lot of flat roofed or partially flat roof buildings. So let's give it a bit of time. I would think that asking you to contact, that's at my end, sorry. Asking you to contact, the other land banks and find out how they're dealing with the drains in unheated buildings would be really, really helpful for this project and or for others. I think that at the end of this meeting, I hope we'll have time. I went through the preservation plan, and I think there's a lot of information that directs us collectively, the city and the HRC, as to what we should be doing with vacant and endangered buildings. So before we come back to the conversation with you, I think that's one task that we should all take on is, okay, we've got a new preservation plan. What does it direct us to do? What did we all agree to by accepting the plan? And have we done that relative to this building? So I would think that you're doing a little bit more research as to how are the other land banks dealing with these vacant buildings and the water issue through the winter, and our taking a look at our preservation plan and what it has directed us to do and the city's done. Obviously, what you've done hasn't been successful. So what else can we do? I mean, you guys are set up as a fabulous organization to help us save existing buildings. So if it's not working, how do we adjust so that it can work? So that's a broader conversation that really belongs to your single building here, but it is an important building. And I'm also interested if you could just give us the citations of where those the limitations on using any additional stabilization funds are. Like it doesn't, if there's $35,000, $40,000 available for demo, it sure feels like we could get a roof and some heat tracing and a solar collector up there to run it.
The stabilization was done on a previous round of grant funds, and we're not allowed to do multiple rounds of funds on the same task.
Are there any exceptions to that? Or anyway, if you could give us a citation for give us that language, that would be helpful. It would just confirm what you're saying in a way that would satisfy me that.
So we would be going to our grantors and saying, well, the grantors wouldn't approve it. So I know that for a fact. So.
And those monies come through the Attorney General's office. You apply directly to the AG's office?
It comes through the Attorney General's office, but it's managed by Enterprise Community Partners.
So Enterprise, is there an Enterprise office in Albany now?
I don't believe so. The folks that we work with are out of New York City.
Okay. So they disperse the Attorney General funds?
Yes.
And one other suggestion I'd make, or I hope that we can have further conversation between this meeting and any future ones, but it'd be interesting to see, and I've noted the land bank's absence in a lot of our conversations about vacant buildings, and I'm not saying that's the land bank's fault, but I really think that the land bank needs to be at every vacant building conversation that the Historic Resources Commission has. And I'd love to know how many vacant buildings the land bank has in the South End Historic District, and have you considered packaging them?
You can, it's all on our website, and in fact, you can look at the property map with everything that we have. We also have a project out right now attempting to try to package properties like you're talking about. But the greater mission of the land bank is to get property back in productive use and also eliminate blight. So while I understand the position, that, you know, to save historic buildings, our mission is to save buildings, but not to save every building. You know, I fully admit part of what we do is demolition, and that's part of our job as well. So.
Right, but other land banks market buildings in historic districts and specifically for use of the historic tax credit. And so I get that we could go on the website and look, but you know, I work for a preservation nonprofit. I haven't heard from the Albany Land Bank about you marketing buildings more globally or having this package. So I'm not sure how it's being marketed, but I'd love to work with you, and I think other commissioners and probably people who are listening in would really love to continue working with the land bank and finding win-win solutions to, you know, reaching out to developers. And, you know, we're going to hear from developers who package buildings, historic buildings, and rehabilitate them. And there's a scale that's necessary. And so I was aware that there is a package out for, I thought that was for new construction. So, you know, I'll go to the website and look.
It's a combination of properties, but if there's a developer that you know of that's interested in this building or other historic buildings, send them our way. Like, that would be wonderful. But then again, the question comes up is, how long do we wait? You know, how long do we leave it the way it is with people in the neighborhood or living in the neighborhood and have to deal with being in the neighborhood with this kind of building in it? So I guess that's just the question I would pose. How long do we wait? When is enough enough? When is enough marketing enough? When is enough creative ideas enough? When is it enough? And we have to come up with a solution.
And I guess I'd pose that I don't see a very robust marketing effort, and it's on the land bank. The condition of the building right now is really on the land bank. The land bank.
That's not true. I have been in that building since the day we got it, and the condition of that building is not that much different from when we got it. So that's not a true statement.
Right. No, that's my point.
Land bank.
That's my point. So money for stabilizing the building, improving it, making sure. So right now it's not going to harm anybody in the community, but
it's harming people every day, to be quite honest. But you and I are going to have to disagree on that. So.
The bigger picture here is we need to find a plan to restore the neighborhood, the community, to encourage investment down there.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
by doing or taking down or peeling down one building at a time, I don't know if that's actually encouraging investment or discouraging it. And
we're actively working on a major project to try to encourage investment right now, but it has to be a multi-pronged approach, and saving every single building is not gonna be the answer either. Some of them are too far gone, unfortunately. If anyone here would like to go in and see that building, would like to take a look, walk through some of the other buildings we have, we would be more than happy to show folks that. If you have folks that are interested, we would be more than happy to bring them into the fold. We, at this point, we have tried to do that many, many times, and we're still having this conversation. So,
John, we actually have a couple people in line for public comment. If we want to turn it over before taking a motion, is that okay?
I guess, what I would say that, we certainly appreciate everything that the land bank is trying to do in marketing these properties. It's just a charming little building, and we certainly, if buying a little bit of time, this is kind of the poster child for what we talked about 2 weeks ago, when we said, okay, we are distressed over the emergency demolitions because buildings get too far gone and become an emergency. This hasn't become one yet, but it is an emergency or a blight in the neighborhood. And but as to Jack's point, it's not an imminent danger of collapse at this moment. And this is just the sort of thing that we were talking about 2 weeks ago to say, okay, let's see if we can collectively look at a strategy to save a building, buy it a little bit of time to see if there is a strategy. If there isn't, and stay in a 90-day period, it comes back and back for demolition. I mean, I think we owe the building a chance, but it can't go on forever.
So we have we have a big state and we have a handful of land banks. This is kind of, John, to the broader question and maybe is supportive of what Jack has suggested of let's all do a little more work on this. What do the other land banks approaches to presenting and marketing the buildings look like? We can look at that. So that might be a task that each commission member takes on. That's at least the online version. And I guess a question is, maybe Aaron, Glennon, you can help with this, is can we understand how our buildings in Albany through the land bank, what kind of, are we losing the same number of buildings or same percentage of buildings, I guess, as are being lost in Newburgh and Buffalo and Syracuse and whatever other land banks we should be looking at within the districts. And if we are, that's pretty useful information. If we're losing less, well, that says the path that you've taken on has some success. And if we're losing more, that says, well, maybe some of the approaches that have been used here. But I don't know that. I don't know the land banks.
I can get that. I can get a lot of that data.
That would be great. That would be very helpful. Yeah,
I can happily pass that on.
Yep.
Well, would we want to defer the decision on demolition for, say, a 90-day period and give ourselves and the land bank an opportunity to work together to see what can be done, practically speaking, and see if there's a mechanism or an avenue towards saving the building? I mean, that's in alignment with the preservation plan and some of the action items within it. And it does speak to the issue of the vacant buildings ordinance and the inventory and looking at what one can do to avoid the ultimate emergency or ultimate demolition. But it needs to happen quickly. I think, we don't want to put the building through another winter. We don't want to saddle the land bank with something that is totally untenable, but it's worth a look.
I like that. Do you want a motion? Do you want public comment? How do you want to, what's the procedure?
Well, let's have a motion and then we can take public comment. We won't vote on the motion, but we'll put one on the table so the public knows where we're leaning or what the thought process is.
So the motion would be that we table this request for 90 days, that during the 90-day period, some assignments of research and collaboration of data be undertaken. And I think we've listed that all already. Amanda, you offered some information. We can look at the other land bank sites. We can find, Amanda asked you to find out about how others are dealing with interior drains in winter. And I'm not sure what else is on that list. Aaron Glennon maybe has some details of that. That's a motion.
I'll second.
Or we actually have, and then I have one person who would like to comment. So,
Please.
Oops, where'd she go? Sorry.
Hi, my name is Joanne Morton. You hear me?
Yes, we can. You have, Joanne, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And there are a couple other people here that might want to speak also, but
Okay.
I'm speaking as a resident here on Alexander Street, across the street actually from the house that you're speaking about. And that house has been vacant, I want to say, for 20+ years. Prior to it becoming vacant, there was a longtime resident there. It was a beautiful home. When he and his wife left the property and it went through transition, it was purchased by someone else. The house had some issues. They did a patch or replacement on the roof, which didn't seem to fix the issue. The house became vacant again, and it has sat vacant since that time. My concern and the concerns of my neighbors is, not just this property, but all these properties that have X's on them. I mean, the 33 has an X, 35, which is next to it, has an X, 30, 29, or whatever the number is. You have 3 in a row. All had the same issues. People start to work on them, and for whatever reason, the work stops. So it just sits there. I live here. I know none of you folks do, so you can't relate to the issues that we see that this blight brings on. Yes, we would love to preserve as many of these buildings as we can, but you talk about funding. I watched when they had the open house, and folks came in and they came out shaking their head. Some of the people were folks who actually do that type of work, and the cost to repair seemed to be prohibitive to them. So to think that, yes, put this house back on the market, but then, unless somebody could qualify for all these funds that you're talking about, the work is not going to happen. And, to put the land bank through another hoop about demolition, I've gone to these meetings where they've applied for demolition. There was a property that's almost directly behind the one you're talking about that was supposed to be demolished, where they had requested, and historic resource commissions or whoever denied it. And within a short time frame, that building had to be taken down. So if it's, yes, 40,000 is a lot of money, but if it's cheaper for them to do a planned demolition where they could possibly get the cost reduced, then I would say do it. Whereas if they're forced into a situation where it becomes an emergency demo, then it's going to cost more. Who's paying for it? With the preservation plan, I think with your preservation plans, you need to put some money behind it, because it doesn't make sense to say we want to preserve all these buildings, but then, you don't put any teeth in it in regards to funds. There are several buildings on this street, we just, that have the X's, and I know you don't put the X's on them, but, maybe you should start to look at those buildings. You being historic commission, look at the buildings, it's like, okay, are we losing all these buildings? Identify the buildings that you.
Joanne, your 3 minutes are up if you want to just quickly finish.
So my point is, I'm in favor of the demo, because I don't feel that, the resources are out there for people who might be interested in doing it, or there are too many hoops for them to jump through. So, if you let it go for another year, not 3 months, I don't think it's a good thing. Do you guys want to?
Thank you.
No, thank you for your comment.
Okay. And then Kara, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm Kara Macri from Historic Albany Foundation. And first, I just want to thank the Historic Resources Commission for being so thorough in all the questions that they've asked and their thoughtfulness. This is not an easy thing for any of us. Obviously, we all hate losing historic buildings. The South End, particularly, every loss is kind of a major loss. As Commissioner Tobin pointed out, the South End has taken major losses. While I don't have the figure of pre-Civil War demos, nearly 40% of the entire South End Groesbeckville Historic District has been demolished since it was initially listed. That's wildly significant. And that does make every additional building even more important. And this building being so old, one of the few wood frame buildings left, really does ratchet it up higher on that list of importance. I said, we really appreciate the thoroughness you've looked at it. We do understand that not every building can be saved, and that even though you guys are looking at all of the different things that can be done, we do understand that it may not save this building. However, having this conversation is critical, because while it may not save this building, there are how many hundreds, if not thousands, of more buildings in comparable condition. And this is the beginning of those kind of conversations that need to happen for something to move forward. We're obviously happy to bring our experts to the table. We do have several board members, preservation architects, experts who we work with all the time that we are happy to bring to the table to discuss, especially the flat roof issue. Actually, as we were sitting here, we shot an email off to one of our architects with, okay, have you encountered this here in other cities? Because they do work outside the capital region as well. So we're happy to bring expertise to that. We did try to market the building with the land bank at our rehab fair last year, and no, it didn't seem to be successful. We're looking again this year at how to make those kinds of things more successful. How can we have a better partnership? And just before this application was submitted to you guys, we were actually talking with another land bank staff member about, okay, this building is really important. We need to do another marketing strategy. What are some things we can do? Can we do a month-long push for this? Okay, how do we get it out there? What are the audiences? So having a bigger conversation about that, how we can all work together to kind of put these buildings out there, I think would be great, because there are a lot of people out there that can help. So if we can all work together, that would be great. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it for public comment for this property.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. I would entertain a vote on that motion. All those in favor of the motion to defer demolition for a 90-day period until giving us time to assess the situation further and try and work as a group to find a solution or determine a future. I'm sorry, I'll stop talking and call it to a vote.
Aye.
All those in favor of the motion, wave your hand.
Aye.
Okay, I see 5 waves. The motion is carried. Okay. The next
Amanda, I will follow up with you with the information that was requested this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. Have a good evening, everybody.
Bye, Amanda.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is 78 Clinton Avenue, 133 Clinton Avenue, 303 Clinton, and 307 Clinton. The home leasing partnership certificate of appropriateness for the rehabilitation of the 4 vacant masonry structures.
I want to just officially, for the minutes, recuse myself. I'm going to leave the meeting. Aaron, Glennon will call me back in when this is over.
Okay.
I have a conflict. All right,
Yep.
bye.
Good to go, John?
Yeah.
I have, this is Jeff McDonald with 3T Architects representing Home Leasing. Adam from Home Leasing's on as well. You may or may not remember, we were in the same team that's presenting tonight has worked on the 70 buildings on the same street. We were actually in front of this board. Turns out, John, it was over 2 years ago for those 70 buildings. In general, I'll speak to these 4 that they're going to be typical and handled in the same similar fashion as the 70 other buildings. We're going to restore and renovate the exteriors in terms of paint, their masonry. The front stairs will be replaced. One of the big topics you may recall from last time is the windows. All these windows, contrary to the original project, are the original wood windows, and we will be on the street facade, of course. We will be retaining those and repairing and restoring them for this project. These buildings are all going for tax credits through SHPO and National Park Service. I can speak to, I think Aaron's scrolling through, each building is either 4 stories or 3 stories with 3 or 4 units in each building. That's in essence the gist of each of those. In the packet here too, there are some the facades on the back we're going to handle with replacement windows on those. I believe the committee was okay with that last time. Some of them, some cases, we have to demolish even part of the existing structure because it wasn't original to the building and is in terrible shape. Removing the pictures on the screen now, removing the existing fire escapes. I know I went quickly, but I think that's about the scope of the work at this time. We'll obviously work with you on, or the paint colors will be, original or relate to the historic fabric of the building and the street.
Well, it's certainly encouraging to see the restoration of this large number of original windows, and that.
Yeah, they were in pretty decent shape. So we, obviously we have a preservation consultant who's recommending to get our tax credits. We're going to need to do that.
Yeah.
And in general, hopefully you guys have seen the original project, and even the painting and the work done on those is really a stark improvement and looking quite nice.
Yeah,
we're pushing to get done, but
What's the status of these now relative to the state and the Park Service? If
I speak out of text or out of turn, let me know. I know part 1s are in. I believe the part 2s are, if they're not in, they will be shortly.
They haven't reviewed them yet. Okay.
We can get those to you.
No, I was just wondering if those reviews were complete.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Gotcha.
But you're suggesting that the scope of work that you've got here for each of these is really very, very similar to the other 70 however many buildings, with the exception that we've got more original windows here.
Correct. Pretty much identical.
Also, on these 4 buildings, you're replacing the wood stoops or the wood stair.
Correct.
And are any original railings being retained, or are they all new railings?
I believe they're been replaced already. If I should know that, John, I apologize. Looking at my drawings on my other screen here. If they're original, we'll certainly try to keep them, but I believe they've been replaced. So that, been replaced in the past. Sorry, and these will be all new if I misspoke.
Right. Aaron, do we have, stair profiles and details and examples of railing for the project to just verify the detailing of the stair, appropriate nosings, and that sort of thing?
I don't believe they were included. Now that you say that, John, I don't believe they were included in the drawings, but Jeff, would that be something you could provide us with?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Similar to what's out there, and it will, be similar to what's out there now, but we can absolutely send those.
Okay. Those can be provided through Aaron. She can circulate them to the commission.
Thank you. I don't know if you guys want to, well, obviously you have this separate, so I could answer any questions on this one, or we can move to 163, 165. I'm still not sure what the address is on that one yet, but.
Do you have a sense of what the square footage costs for the rehabs are on those?
Yeah, honestly, I don't totally. I mean, I don't know if Adam's willing to divulge. I'm not sure where it's breaking down. I mean, we know general sense what the scope of the whole work is, but we haven't run math of that. I don't know if Adam, you want to answer.
Yeah, it's we're working on costs currently, and it's roughly like between 225 and $250 a square foot.
Hard and soft?
A hard cost
Hard.
only.
Okay. Yeah, you had the soft that goes up another $100 a square foot, right now. Anything else on those? I can move on to 165, 63.
Well, Aaron, they're presented independently, aren't they, in their application?
They are, I had split, I pulled 163, 165 out because that's also going to be going through
Planning board.
the other boards. So I would recommend that the HRC
Let's render a
do a
decision.
motion for these four, and then we can do 165 separately.
Okay. All right, I would entertain a motion on this application.
I'll move that we approve the application pending the acceptance of the stair and the railing details, as will be provided to Aaron and then circulated to all of us.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. We can open it up to comments from the audience if anyone wants to make a comment on this application.
I currently don't have anyone from the public with comments for this property, so.
Okay. Then I'll call it to a vote. All those in favor signify by waving.
Aye.
Okay. Wait a minute, Jeff, you're not supposed to wave.
Oh, I can't vote?
I got to count hands here.
Sorry.
No, the motion is passed. So why don't we move on then to,
I'm getting a little punch drunk. I haven't eaten or had my my coronavirus wine yet.
I hear you.
So while you want to bring up 165. So 165 is a little bit of a different creature, though we are going to same process in terms of national parks tax credits. The exterior will be maintained as is. We're calling to repoint and basically restore and renovate the whole masonry facade. You'll see one thing I'd like to talk about, where railings may come in. We do need to provide handicapped accessibility, and we actually kind of considered it a plus that you can see on the image that's on your screen now. There's some railings down at the bottom right corner. There's access to the basement. We're also providing a elevator within this building. This building is 3 stories with a basement. It's not a huge footprint. We'll be providing 12 units in there. Basically, even the inside is a center stair, and each of these units incorporate the existing classrooms, which are kind of open spaces. So we've tried to utilize the building in the best we could, take what it has to give, as we say. But you can see the railing, back to the handicap accessibility. We thought this was a good advantage that we're not plunking a huge ramp on the exterior of this building, that we're able to kind of recess down into the sidewalk and come around the side of the building to get in at the basement level to access our elevator. You can see in that same elevation at the bottom of the screen how many steps there would be to get in this building. And we weren't even sure if it was going to be feasible, and we discovered this access. So it's really worked well. Now, those railings, I think we need to be in context. They'll have to be new, but we can get a ornamental style, historically appropriate railing that we would provide at that location. And then I think the next topic would be the windows. Now, the difference with this building is these windows have been removed. The original windows have been removed and replaced with an aluminum, replacement window. What we're proposing here too is to come back with a wood-clad aluminum on this building. Same profile, same arches, same look that the building has now, but just in a aluminum with a wood interior, insulated modern window. Roof
About the
is,
windows, one question on the windows. You've got square head windows into those arched openings, including on the south facade. That's not what's existing now, right? Is there any reason I know they're more expensive. So, and I guess a couple questions on that. One is, can you save the original the windows that are there because they are arched head? And
all the windows there are aluminum replaced.
And those that you're seeing that are appearing as arch heads are actually square on the interior. They don't fit the arched openings.
Right. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
So they're in behind the brick.
Yeah, Marilyn, if you go by the property, I did the one day, you can see that the windows there don't conform to the fenestration opening, that they are, as Mike said, they're square tops set behind the actual original plane.
well, it's not. Yeah, I'll go by and look. It's not what it looks like just on my little laptop and all. Can you zoom in?
I can't.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You're on a PDF. Yeah, I can, but it looks like they're round head. That's not what it looks like in my viewing.
They may, just to be clear, and Mike might even know this. I mean, we've looked at it, but the front ones might actually be round. But
yeah.
On the side, they're square. The goal is to replace these with round. Last we spoke to the owner, maybe Adam can confirm that, but I believe that was the game plan.
That's good. That's not what the elevations show, correct?
The front does. I think maybe, I don't know if it's misrepresented. I guess it looks a little odd on the side. It may just be a graphic thing, honestly. We can confirm that.
I've got a close-up photo of those arched openings, but since we're going back with true arch tops, I don't know that it necessarily matters that the replacement windows don't match the openings.
Okay. So the front elevations, the arched openings will be, yeah. Okay.
Maintained, yes.
Yeah, that's not when I'm looking at, say, what sheet? I gotta zoom back out. A200. It's not, maybe I'm reading it wrong. Those look square head to me.
Yeah, you mean that little line? It may just be a graphic.
Yeah.
I think, yeah. It might be, let me just check.
Okay.
Double
The other
check that.
question I have for you is, I think the reference is it would show up on plan, but I don't have the plans. What about the vents? I mean, you got, I don't know what you're doing. What's the heating per unit? I mean, is that why?
Yeah, they're separate units. We'd run everything up through the roof. Again, we have to deal with, National Parks and SHPO. There'd be nothing exposed on the facade.
So the small new exhaust vents added to most exterior walls. And it said I would pick it up on the plans, but I don't have the plans. So what does that mean? Small new exhaust vents added to most exterior walls.
Oh, you're looking at an elevation.
Your general exterior scope of work notes.
That may have been a rogue note to slip through. I'm gonna have to fire somebody for that. She might be listening right now. Sorry, which note was it?
A200 general note.
Yeah, what number?
2.
You might be looking at an old elevation, actually. We updated these, so that may have slipped through. You may not have this updated. Apologize.
These are May 1.
Oh, demo. Oh, you're looking at demo.
No. Well, I
No,
don't
we're
know.
not.
It says
No,
north and it's A2.
Yeah, my 200 doesn't say that. My number 2 on my A200 says fire escape to be removed. So no, there would be no vent. I mean, the short answer is there'd be no vent, no added new vents on the exterior of this building.
I think what Marilyn is referring to is not the keyed notes, but the general exterior scope of work notes, number 2.
Shall new exhaust vents.
Small new
small.
exhaust vents will be added.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No. That's a general note that should come off of here. Apologize. It's applicable to, being general, slip through.
So are those vents being gathered and sent up through the roof and the back?
Correct.
of the building?
Yes, correct. Okay. And there's actually a flat roof on top another opportunity too. There's those 2 brick chimneys you see are wide open and unused. We were thinking about, considering using that for, like duck chases to do that kind of work. Any other questions?
The schedule on these, like the other ones we saw, the part 2s haven't gone to the state yet?
I believe so. Actually, Mike, you would confirm that?
That's correct. They're still drafted, but as we've been issue spotting while the drawings have been developed, we've been consulting with SHPO to make sure that we've got the cleanest submission we can when it's formally submitted.
What will you typically do relative to taking on the exterior construction in this case, or any construction relative to just having a preliminary part 2 approved, or do you go ahead and keep your fingers crossed? What in general have you done relative to the proposed works, the part 2s?
Is that for me? I think, sorry, Mike, you can check again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've done enough work with them that we'll proceed with our best understanding. But specifically with Mike's guidance too, there's nothing. Well, to say there's nothing. We have a pretty good understanding of what their expectations are from us, and we'll proceed in that manner.
Yeah, nothing gets by me. But Marilyn, I don't think I understand the question.
And those square head arched openings. Yeah.
That's right. I was looking for that.
So all the new windows in the building will fully fill the masonry openings.
Correct.
And be set at the plane where they currently sit.
Yes.
Okay. And all of the areas of repointing, have you done mortar analyses and are matching the mortar?
We haven't done it yet, John, but we will.
Okay.
It'll match the mortar color, makeup, have the sand tested, and correct.
Same composition and strength.
Yep, you got it. I believe it's cement, which surprises me. I thought it would be lime putty, but and it may be actually, but we'll have to get it tested.
Was the building painted originally, or was it stained? It looks like it might have been stained, and were the joints a red stain as well? What?
I don't think it was stained. If that's the mortar.
No, on the brick.
No, I don't think that. I think that's just weathering on the brick. Don't believe it was stained. Mike, you can correct me again if I'm wrong on that too. It does need, it does all need to be repointed. There's, some spots it isn't so bad. Other spots we're losing mortar.
Yeah, it looks like some foundation repointing is in order too,
Yeah.
or some stone replacement in a few spots.
Yeah, so I found, so I'm gonna be able to answer your guys' question. I found the photos I was looking for. So what's misleading is, and maybe this is something we'll have to talk, and I believe there's two things going on. I'm going back to the windows and the round head. I want to make sure we're all clear on this. What's happening is the original wood trim kind of circles around, but that aluminum replacement window that exists went in behind it. So I believe, if talking to Home Leasing, we were going to replace, when we put that new aluminum window in, it would follow the arch, which is in essence the way the windows were originally. I should send you all this photo. I wish I could probably could have shared the screen.
So the upper sash of the windows were a rectangular shape, but the glass opening followed the profile of the arch.
Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure, John. It could have been.
Very often that's how they were built. They
Yeah.
weren't a true round top. It was a round, the glass opening in the top of the sash was followed the masonry opening, giving a little margin up there. And if you're doing clad wood replacement, they can match that.
Right. Right. We've done that. And actually, we get really good. These companies can even mimic the profile of the original trim.
And then for your railing, you'll provide Aaron with
Yes.
some updated drawings on the
Yeah.
railing
Yes.
design for that? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, we'll still have to do kind of a pipe rail on the inside, but I think the outside rail, as it goes down, could be ornamental and be a little more historic. I mean, even though I'm looking at the front of it now, it just has a regular, like, circular pipe rail entering the building now, but we'll do something a little nicer.
Aaron, would you go back to that south elevation? The photo?
Yep.
Oh, you can't zoom in. Mike, did you not see any evidence of like red iron oxide staining or anything? It sure feels like it might have. Is the mortar tinted? I'm sorry, I think I asked that before.
You may be correct. When I was on site, I didn't see any evidence of it, but I could have missed it.
Yeah, it kind of, I mean, I don't know looking at the photo, but it from a 1880s or whatever, it sure looks like the brick might have had a red iron oxide stain and or the masonry have tinting. I'll have to look at it. But have you looked closely at that? Do you kind of know, do you have that all part figured out yet?
I have not.
Okay.
I have a 1907 original photograph of the kindergarten class on the front steps.
You are really old. Wow, that means you were born in
My mother,
Oh,
1907.
well,
She was in kindergarten there.
I don't suppose it's a color photo, is it?
No.
So maybe kind of add to the list, Aaron, you're going to receive the information that John identified, and maybe we can get a little bit more information on the original masonry treatment of the
Right.
original bricks and if it appears there's any staining that occurred and or the joints, what we've got there. And then I'll take a look at it as well.
We make a motion in regard to this applicant?
I'll move that we approve the application in front of us pending our submission and then our review, the commission's review of the railing details and the brick masonry treatment relative to existing conditions, and a clarification on the windows relative to the, a correction relative to the windows and the description that you've given us here, and or that there won't be any exterior vents. That those get clarified.
Second.
Okay, is there any comment? I would just suggest that we, clarify, as we do with most window replacements, that they fully fill the masonry openings and are installed in the same plane in which they currently exist.
Yeah.
We can add that.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments?
We do.
Okay.
Before I open it up for public comments, I just want to make it clear that the Historic Resource Commission is only looking at exterior rehabilitation. They do not look at zoning or use of a building. If you do have comments about the conversion of the structure, public comment will be taken at the planning board on May 26th. We will just be looking at exterior rehab tonight. So with that, I will Brenda, do you still have comments?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You have
Hi, I'm
3 minutes.
Brenda Robinson from the Arbor Hill Neighborhood Association. And I certainly want to say that the HRC is very thorough. This is the first time I attended one of your meetings, and you guys are very thorough. And I do thank you for giving the information of what you guys actually do. And I'm making a comment, being that I waited all this time listening to the presentation. And I have to say that I do stand with the homeowners and the residents in opposing this project. And a large part is because the residents and homeowners were not included, contacted, consulted at all. So I do take an issue with that, along with other quality of life issues that I noted in a letter that I sent you all.
And Brenda, that letter and the petitions were circulated to the commission before the meeting this evening. Just
thank you.
That. All right. Thank you. Okay. And Kara, you.
Hi, it's Kara Macri from Historic Albany again. I'm sorry to hear that the neighborhood is not for this project. I have to say, Historic Albany is over the moon to see something happening with this building. It is such a prominent building on Clinton Avenue and has been sitting vacant for so long. It really needs this attention, and residential conversion is an excellent reuse for this building. So we're thrilled to see that this building is getting its much needed attention. I was going to wait till the end to comment on all of them, but the project as a whole is great. And it's really good to see a lot of this happening. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then, Jamie Robinson, did you still wish to speak?
I was going to talk about if there was any thought process taken for parking, but I just learned that this is not the meeting for that. So
Yes, the May 26th planning board would be the meeting for that.
okay,
Okay,
thank you.
you're welcome. And that is it for public comment for this project.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll entertain a vote. All those in favor, please wave. Okay. The motion is carried, and we look forward to additional information being as requested.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much, you all.
Okay.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is a 25 Delaware Avenue. It was just a touch over a year ago. We reviewed the initial application of this project and delighted to see the project is moving forward and has come back to us. So who would like to speak to the application for 25 Delaware?
This is Michael Berkby with Conifer. I'll just give a brief kind of history of the past year and where we've been with the project, and then I'll turn it over to Matt Duggan, our architect, to walk through the presentation before the commission.
Okay.
So thank you for taking the time to review our this project again. As John mentioned, we were here just about a year ago with our first go around of our design. Since that time, we've had conversations both with SHPO, with the state Homes and Community Renewal. Both groups had some concerns about what we were planning, and there were similar feedback to the feedback we got from the Historic Resources Commission. So we've taken all of that and kind of reworked our design a little bit. We did have a meeting in February with Aaron as well as Brad from the city to talk kind of where we were going, the direction we were going. Members of SHPO were also involved in that conversation. And so that really provided some direction and informed where we went with our design. And I think with that brief overview of our work on over the past year, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Great, thank you. My name's Matt Duggan. I'm with the architectural team. And the initial, well, let me take one step back. The site is a full block site. It's bound by Delaware Avenue, Myrtle Street or Myrtle Avenue, Lark Street, and Morris Street. And it's a sloping site where the low point is at Myrtle Ave and Lark Street. And currently there's one building on the site, which is the fire signal building that was built in 1917. In the past, there actually was a second building on the site, and that was part of the senior center when the fire signal building was used as a senior center. And that building has since been demolished. So what's currently on the screen is that design from just over a year ago. And you can see there, we had the entrance to the building located in a 1.5-story link that was connected to the rear of the fire signal building, essentially connected where the previous addition or the previous second building had its link. And that provided the primary entrance both to the residential buildings proposed on the site and provide an accessible entrance into the fire signal building, which was proposed to be used as community space, both for the residents in the residential building and also for the community at large. One of the biggest comments and kind of themes that we were hearing from the commission last year is that the new building was too prominent, especially from Delaware Avenue. So if we go to the second image, you can now see, or go back one if you don't mind. You can now see the site plan of the revised scheme. So the big move we made was to reimagine how you entered both buildings. So instead of having a link building connect the two buildings and allow that to provide an accessible entrance to the fire signal building, instead we're entering the fire signal building from the west side, which is historically the rear side of the building. And we're also entering the new building from that same path. So essentially right down the center of the block, we're creating a new path which would be accessed off Morris Street. And that would have an entrance into the residential building. And as you continue further down, it would have an entrance into the fire signal building. And what we're now providing is our accessible connections between floors will be within the existing fire signal building. Another thing that you can see from this site plan is that the playground that we were previously showing on the front lawn facing Delaware Avenue has now been tucked between the two buildings, essentially in the location where that link building was previously proposed. Another important change you can see from this image is that the overall footprint of the new building has been reduced, one by eliminating the link, but also there were some specific comments from the commission last year that in the old design, it was actually a bit of an L-shaped design, and that L shape came along Morris Ave, or Morris Street rather, towards Delaware Avenue. That has been eliminated, although that area is now where the entrance is shown. So in the next image will then show, the next image now is showing the fourth floor of the building. So you can see generally how the building lays out. The elevator has moved over to that entrance, and you can see that there is there's an open covered connection roof, just a canopy really, that connects from one of the stairs, essentially a secondary entrance to the residential building, to the primary entrance of the fire signal building, which we'll see as we go through the presentation a little bit further with a perspective view. So here's a view from Delaware Avenue. You can see to the right is Morris Street, and you can see the corner of the Boys and Girls Club. To the left is Myrtle Ave, and there you can see the edge of the Hackett Middle School. And then right in the center is the fire signal building. And the orange zone that you can see to the right along Morris Ave is where the entrance to the residential building will be located. So if we go ahead one more slide, if you will. Yep. So this is the corner of the building from the previous design from last year. So this is right from Morris Street by Delaware Avenue. And you can see that the playground was previously in that front lawn. And you can see this, the L-shaped leg of the building. If you go to the next image, you can see how we've redesigned this end. So from this end here, you can now see the Boys and Girls Club is just to the right, and you zoom in a little bit further, and now you can see.
Sorry.
That's perfect. Actually, you can go forward one more. We can zoom in right to the entrance. So we're on Morris Street, and this is that path, that mid-block path I was talking about. So you can see to the right, that is the main entrance to the proposed residential building. You can see that there is a decent amount of glass on the ground level, as well as brick. And that is where the leasing office and management office for the residential building would be. You see a little bit further down, you can see a double set of doors that look brown, which is representing wood and glass. That's the front entrance to the building. And then the fire signal building is to the left there. Go one more forward.
May I interrupt for just one moment? Erin, did you call Erin Tobin?
Yes,
to
I
rejoin?
did. She's back on.
Oh, okay.
I'm here.
I'm
I've been
sorry.
here.
All right, you're hiding off the screen here.
Oh,
Okay, please resume. I'm sorry. No problem. So this is a view from Lark Street, looking down towards the Hackett Middle School in the distance. Boys and Girls Club again is to your left, and Moore Street is that cross street you're seeing right in front. So this gives you a good view as you look towards the middle school that the site does slope essentially an entire story. So what's proposed for the above a parking garage, and that parking level is exposed on Myrtle Avenue and right at the corner of Lark, so that vehicles are able to drive directly in without a large ramp. What you can see to the left, again, that kind of orange colored zone, that was that front entrance that we were looking at in the previous slide. You can see what we've done with.
We had a 5-story building originally, right? And this is a reduced height version that we're seeing here.
It was originally 4 stories. They've reduced the height of the 4-story original structure. But it still is remaining as a 4-story building.
Okay, so when we saw it in a year ago, say from this this view, I see at this corner, the northwest corner, I guess, 1, 2, 3, I see 4 stories here, right? In this building.
It is 5 stories with the garage.
Okay. So it's a little, I think it'll be a little confusing to me anyway, because when we count the garage versus we look at other elevations, I guess my question is, what happens so looking
Marilyn, I'm sorry, can we let Matt go through the presentation and hold questions till the end?
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Matt, continue.
No problem at all. So you can see with the language of the building, we've tried to have a contemporary language, but use windows and other materials that are windows using a scale that's comparable with all the buildings in the neighborhood. And material wise, you're trying to grab a kind of playful, colorful palette, but go with materials that again are common in the area. This end, we're taking some of our kind of contemporary cues from the mid-century modern Boys and Girls Club, but we've also broken up the elevation into a bunch of discrete elements so that the scale of the building, is not just a monolith. It has interest, and it has, kind of fine-grained texture to really feel like this block is being filled with, with several buildings, if you will. So on the next image here, we're going to go along to the corner of Myrtle and Delaware Avenue. And here, this is where you can see how that, 5th story, if you will, exists. As you go down Myrtle Ave, it's quite a bit of a steep slope. And towards the end, right at the corner of Lark, that is where the 5th story is exposed. And you can see the 2 garage doors in the left side of this image. You can also see that the playground is set in that space between the 2 buildings. And because the building is sloped, essentially from Delaware Avenue, the 2nd floor is really at grade, and the 1st floor is at a kind of mid-level of Morris Street. So again, you can see here similar language on all sides of the building, similar material palette on all sides of the building. You can see again, we've tried to break up the facade in thoughtful ways. So for example, this darker zone is approximately the width of the fire signal building, and it kind of marks where the playground is, but it also marks that secondary entrance into the residential building, and it plays off the new entrance that were created off that path into the fire signal building. So here now we're in that space between the two buildings, and you can see that covered but open canopy that we're showing to mark the entrance to the fire signal building and also provide cover and mark the secondary entrance into the residential building. And where we're standing is in a place that nobody would really stand. We're in the kind of landscape buffer between the playground and the residential building, but you can see just the corner of the playground structure to the right. So here are the elevations of the building. You can see the upper right corner would be the east elevation from Delaware Avenue. So you can see the fire signal building in the front. You can see here that it really presents itself as a 3-story building from Delaware Avenue. Just to the left of that is that same elevation, but now cut through what we're calling the courtyard or the internal path. And you can see where that blue section is and where the banding kind of drops down 2 levels. That's that secondary entrance into the residential building, which is directly opposite the entrance, the accessible entrance into the fire signal building. Just below that is the elevation, the west elevation of the fire signal building. And if we go to the next image, I'll talk a little bit about how we came up with what the back of this building should be. So here is the back of the fire signal building. As I said earlier, there previously was a second building on the site, and this backside is where the connection, there was a connection, a link building between the two buildings. So you can see the backside is no longer what was originally built. And we don't have an exact idea what was originally built, but we have some clues. So when we go to the next image, I'll start to talk about it in a little more detail. So the ground level, we're keeping pretty simple. We think that the ground level probably was pretty simple, considering that it was down the hill, and there isn't really any physical evidence that survives a fenestration there. So what we're proposing is essentially 3 doors. The double door in the center would be the primary entrance into the building, or at least the primary accessible entrance into the building. And we're using that gable to really be where the building wants that entrance to be. You can see on the upper level that from the previous photo, you can see doesn't exist. So we took our clues from what's happening on the other side of the building. So essentially we have 2 windows that match what's happening on the Delaware Avenue side. And on the gable section, we are showing 4 windows, which when we go to the next image, you'll see that that is what all the gable ends show. They have 4 windows. So we took that as a clue as to what may have been there in the middle, which we don't honestly know exactly what was back there. So this is a view from Myrtle Avenue looking at the site. It gives you a great idea of what the existing conditions are of the back of the fire signal building. And it also gives you a good idea of how the slopes are working. So you can see in the distance, in the far distance is the Boys and Girls Club and Moore Street. And you can see that that's significantly higher than Myrtle Avenue. And to the right is Delaware Avenue, which again is quite a bit higher. So just to our left, kind of where you can see that silver car, that's approximately where the garage entrance would be proposed. So we have a couple more photos just of the surrounding area. So this is same location we were just looking, just turned to face the Hackett Middle School, just to give a sense of scale. So you can see the Hackett Middle School is significantly taller than what we're proposing, and our tallest side of the building is facing our tallest neighbor. So it seems like fairly appropriate move. And then the next image is then just going to be a couple images of the existing building. So this is the fire signal building from Delaware Avenue. Again, just for kind of placing where things are. The Hackett Middle School, you can see, is off to the left. And the Boys and Girls Club would be just to our right. And then here's a more historic photo that I think Aaron found in the 30s.
Yeah.
And then here's an image of that second building with that link that has since been removed from the site. So here are just side-by-side views. Top is the scheme from a year ago. Bottom is the current scheme. Again, top is the previous scheme. You can see that link building.
Matt, would you like to take questions from the commission at this
I
time?
would.
Well, I certainly appreciate all the effort you've gone to take some of the comments that we had offered in the previous review a year ago and take them to heart, particularly the removal or the dramatic shrinking of the return at the north end of the building that seemed to wrap the end of the fire signal building. And it's cleaner in that you don't have the hyphen connection now, that it's more of a grade level entry to the fire signal building. Has the fire signal building and the work that you're proposing to do on that gone to SHPO for review?
So the overall presentation that you have seen has gone to SHPO, and they issued a letter stating there was no adverse effects to the fire signal building. And in that letter, they then stated that they would like the fire signal building to adhere to the National Park Services standards, I believe is what the letter said.
Yeah, they're just looking for more detail on the fire signal building.
Yes.
Yeah, I did see the no adverse effect.
And then we have subsequently actually sent them floor plans of the interior to show them how we are proposing to add a stair to connect the two levels and a handicap lift. So I don't believe we have heard back from them on that, but we have sent them that package as well, so they can have a.
We did get Matt, we did get an initial response from them. Again, what we sent them was fairly schematic. So their response was, we've received your submission, send us, basically they're looking for almost construction level drawings, which we just haven't generated yet.
Yeah.
How many units were there when we saw, actually, if you can go back to the last image, how many units did we see a year ago and how many are there now?
So last year there were 41 bedroom units. I'm sorry, last year there were 34 one bedroom units and 18 two bedroom units for a total of 52 units. This is now a total of 51 units, but the two bedroom count dropped from 18 to 11. So that's how we were able to shrink the building quite a bit. The overall building has shrunk by almost 15%, and the footprint has shrunk by a little bit over 10%. So the building is a bit smaller, but the unit count is 1 unit less, a different mix.
Most of that, I'm still confused about the number of stories because the application materials we said that the overall height of the structure was reduced. So I think that probably most of the unit changes in the square footage, the footprint is once the that L-shaped leg was removed. When I look at these, has the height of the building changed, or have you just kind of stepped back a little bit at the edges?
The height has changed. We previously we had a floor to floor height 1 foot higher than we do now. So we took out a foot essentially on each floor. So we did have 9 foot ceilings. Now we have 8 foot ceilings essentially.
So the building's about 4 feet less in height?
Correct.
Okay.
Can you describe some of the materiality of the proposed building?
Yes, so and this elevation, you can see that gray color at the base, that would be a brick material. And the orangey would be a stucco. And that's trying to relate one color-wise with the fire signal building, but kind of materiality and concept a little bit more with the Boys and Girls Club, which is brick, but it has more of that kind of mid-century modern sleek skin look, which is where the stucco is coming from. The maroon color is shown as a vertical lapse or board and batten, and the rest of the materials are clapboard of varying different exposures. I think we were showing in some areas it has a 7-inch exposure, in some areas it has a 4.5-inch exposure.
And the white colored wrappers that define the different massing elements, what is that composed of?
So those are, they do project forward, which is a little hard to see in this image, but it's kind of like a light blue on a white. But from a material perspective, we haven't drilled down on precisely what it would be. Most likely it would be a PVC trim, but that hasn't been completely vetted out. It could also be a cement fiber or something of that nature.
Okay.
I'd like to ask that we go back to our comments of May, from the May meeting, because we spent a lot of time on it then, and there's a number of bullets, and I think you've probably addressed all those, but it would be helpful rather than start again. Can you pull that up, Aaron? I guess it's the disposition of cases from last year.
It's in the packet, but I do not have it in the presentation. Actually, if you give me 1 second.
I've got it pulled up. I can read it.
Okay.
The notes and comments presented the concept proposal May 1st, 2019. The below bullets reflect the feedback. 1, reduce the overall height of the proposed structure, remove the northeast projection, remove southeast entry and relocated entry to the northeast corner, add facade delineation. The new structure will feature horizontal lap siding red and tan, board and batten blue and tan.
Or is that?
What are you, John? I'm looking at something that instead says.
Hold on, Marilyn.
Yeah.
Notes and comments, yeah.
Oh, no, hold on, John.
I'm looking at something different. It's on page 60 of our packet.
Right. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
I was reading how they have responded to it. Our comments: remove proposed brick and use a modern material, i.e. stone cladding, oversized tile cladding, cast stone panels, exposed architectural concrete, plaster, or stucco. Use a panel system or panel cladding rather than the proposed horizontal lap siding, or in combination with the lap siding to provide more variety to the facade as a backdrop to the historic fire watch building. Use a different color on the first floor in order to help reduce scale of the proposed addition. Consider shading differences in the proposed color for the cladding to reduce the dark monolith look of the facade as a backdrop to the historic fire watch building. Reduce the height of the proposed addition. The height of the addition should not be higher than the existing gable, not the parapet of the existing structure. Suggest revisions utilizing the proposed hyphen and its intermediate entry floor level to allow not aligning, oops, next page. Not aligning the main floor level of the proposed housing block to the existing main floor level of the historic fire watch building. Disconnecting this floor level alignment may help in reducing overall height of the proposed housing block. Reduction of the building mass return at the north end of the proposed housing block to reduce its wrapping impact and visual encroachment on the historic Fire Watch building. And finally, provide contextual drawings of the existing building with the addition, showing the existing streetscapes on either side of the street. So those were the notes that were offered based on the comments that we generated at the May 1st meeting back in 2019. Aaron, do you have anything to add to that?
I do not. No,
I did take myself off mute, didn't I?
you did.
May I comment?
Yes.
Great.
I think they've done a lot. One of the big problem that bothered, I think, all of us was this massive monstrosity that was being created that would have compromised the integrity of really one of the finest historic buildings that we have. And the use of color and different levels, et cetera, have really done a good job to break it up and complement the neighborhood, but protect the building. I think it is just as high as you always said it was, though. And I think what you've done is you needed that height, and what you did is you took the mechanicals and seemed to have recessed them they put them up on the roof and recessed them to the west, so that if you're on the sidewalk and you're looking at it, you don't realize that there's a top on the elevators and top on the air conditioning and so on and so forth. But I think if you look at the picture, and there's a picture that we have that shows everything side by side between the new building and the old one. If you take a look at the top, it's just as high as it was back when we had the rather large monocultured one. And I think that's fine, because I don't see it. It's actually, I'm very pleased with what's happened with it. And I think it's been very respectful for the neighborhood, because it's going to provide 51 homes that are needed. It provides parking, and it does a fair job of not turning around and hurting the Dutch style building. You almost wonder, though, with a large flat roof that probably is unencumbered close to 40% of the surface, it's a shame somebody doesn't have a roof garden up there or a place to go up and take a look at the view. It is a flat roof, and it probably hasn't been encumbered too much by the elevators equipment and the air conditioning. And I just wonder if that wouldn't be a very attractive thing to have in the neighborhood and to attract people to want to actually live there. Okay.
Thank you.
Building on Commissioner McEnany's point about the flat roof, have you looked into solar panels or anything for the roof?
We have not. We haven't successfully implemented solar on a wide scale in New York. Some of our colleagues in other states have done that, but we have not done that here.
I mean, projects in New York State of this size have successfully implemented solar on their roofs, but you're saying Conifer has not done that?
Correct.
This is Brian Donato. One thing I just want to add to that is probably important to note is that because of the soils here, this building is going to be built on piles, so it's unfortunately extremely expensive, and we're struggling to keep it within the cost containments that HCR will actually fund. So I think that's just an important thing to point out as the overall financial feasibility of the project goes.
That's an interesting observation, because the building that was there was decently designed. It was well used by senior citizens, but it failed. That's the reason it was demolished. You could see the cracks going right down through it, and you can't just build on a flat surface with a modest foundation. And it's interesting that you would comment on that, because that's what caused that newer addition to fail and to have to be replaced.
Yeah, it's amazing the existing building is still standing in such great shape, but definitely a big consideration for us.
They picked the best part of the site to locate the building.
I think that's actually the case. It's the geotech shows that as you get further towards Lark, the fills get deeper and deeper.
That's a stream. That's the drain of whatever branch of the beaver kill moves from Elberon Place down through the lake in Washington Park Lake, and then it goes down through that extension. We think of it as an extension of Lark Street, and then it goes rather noticeably mercifully in back of Hackett Junior High School, which is now the middle school, and then it proceeds all the way to meet yet more of the beaver kill, which then goes down into Lincoln Park. So there's a stream there. That's the reason why it failed.
Are you able to use the historic tax credits for the fire signal building rehabilitation with the amount of new construction going on behind it? Have you talked to SHPO about that?
We looked into the financial benefits of using credits for the signal building. It's just such a small piece of the total project that it really doesn't pencil out to be that beneficial to us once you take into account the cost for consultants and just the additional time that would be taken going through the Part 2 process, and then additional time that would have to occur if there were ever any amendments to the Part 2 because of conditions we discovered during construction. So just because the amount of resources there from the credit are so minimal compared to the overall projects, we decided that it wasn't necessarily something that was worthwhile pursuing.
That's a shame, because it could really be something that people would look at as a model. And I noticed you mentioned on the west side there, you had trouble determining where the fenestration was and where there was a door through there and so on. I would think the plans would be available. Is that a Marcus Reynolds building?
I don't believe so. I believe it is actually listed as a Morris Ryder building.
So I'm not sure where the plans are for that one.
We did find an article. SHPO actually helped us find it.
Yeah.
An article that had plans and a rendering that was from before the building was built, and you can tell from the rendering that they weren't done with the design essentially. So we don't know if the plans also were tweaked from there, and you know, we know the footprint matches, but we really don't know if the fenestration matches.
I think you could find from the inside, because obviously they had an addition on it, and that got rid of a lot of things that would have told you what was going on. But it's too bad. I hate to think that bureaucracy is the reason not to have it as a model of using the method that we like to see that restores our old neighborhoods and our crown jewels, and this is one of them.
Aaron, would you go to the elevation renderings? My PDF doesn't change page numbers, so if you could flip through those.
Sure.
Um,
Let me.
I want to talk about the color and the 1, 2, 3, the many colors, which I think are distracting actually for the new construction. One comment is I don't find the CSI notes that you, or the master spec, whatever it is, organized notes that you've got to describe the work on the existing building sufficient. So I'd like to suggest that we get full elevations and specs for the critical areas at the historic building. So we really can talk more about the masonry treatment and the roofing and the window treatments, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't think you've got that fleshed out yet and would like to see that. I think the conversations today are about the massing of the building and the overall project. I think a huge improvement has occurred by eliminating the that northeast corner, or the piece that was eliminated. I think that was a wise move. I do want to say that I think these renderings are a little tricky, and that the building is big, and the height remains on a small site. For me, it remains an issue for this project. I'm glad you stepped it back, but I don't think it's, I think we will all be surprised when we see it go up, that it's been shown to some of its greatest advantages in the selection of these points for the renderings, but it's a really big building, and it's a tall building, and it is still taller than the existing structure, even if it's somewhat set back. I am discouraged about New York State to hear that the tax credits and any of the solar incentives aren't being used. That doesn't really make sense to me. You guys have done a lot of projects all over. We all know what it takes. So yeah, we all know what part twos are and changes, but so that's a little discouraging, but that's your call. I guess my primary concern remaining, aside from knowing not very much about really what you're going to do on the historic building, and assume we should get all that, is I'd like to hear some of the other commissioners speak of the treatment of these different colors on the building. I think it's, in my opinion, it's too much. I think that we had a big gray block for the most part before, and that was heavy and monolithic, but I think we've got something here that is a little much for trying to show off and highlight, as Jack said, one of the jewels of our city. But I'll ask the other commissioners to speak to that.
This is Erin Tobin. I think it's so much better than what we saw a year ago. So I want to echo what the other commissioners have said. It is so much better. It doesn't look like it's going to eat the fire. Did I already say this? It's already looking like it's going to eat the fire signal building. But I think, to Commissioner Kaplan's point, I'm a little concerned about some of the details, like what you mentioned could be PVC or fiber cement, that white trim that's projecting on the different elevations. And I don't personally want to be a tastemaker in terms of the design of new construction, but it does concern me a little bit, because these are all just details that are set up to fail in a way, because they're all protruding details on a historic building, or on a building that's going to be subject to weatherization. And I agree that it's a little distracting from the fire signal building. So I would agree with that. I think the height is a bit of an issue. It's personally not the one I would fall on my sword on, but I, ideally it would come down a full story, so that it was shorter than the fire signal building, if that was possible. That said, I think eliminating that L and keeping it away from Delaware Ave is very important. But I would agree, it's a little bit busy, and I'd be concerned about the longevity of some of these details. I think the busier it is, the more there's the possibility of poorly made new materials failing. That said, I appreciate the creativity. Again, it's so much better than what was there before. Not interested in a gray monolith. And I also think that there's something to be said for quality design and new construction, not making it look ye olde. I don't think we want to see ye olde. I know I don't want to see ye olde. So, it looking like a new building to me is just fine, but it should be quality. And I'd be interested, I don't want to take up too much more time, but I would be interested in the numbers on the historic tax credit, saying it's not worth it. It's if it's a small enough project that I just would be really curious to learn more about that. And to Commissioner Kaplan's point and what I asked earlier about the solar panels, why aren't those incentives working for Conifer? It's a conversation I'd love to have offline.
I've already spoken, but I'll make one more point. The colors don't bother me at all. I think they put variety into it, and I like the corner building that's created. That's very similar in color to the historic building with that that earth color of orange. I am a little bit. I'm a lot upset with the white lines. They're stark and they look like they're made out of aluminum siding. And I think that should be toned down something more to a gray to show the, I like the fact that they come out a little bit and they act like a soffit of some sort, but to make them so shockingly white, I think it would be wrong. It is to minimize some of the size, and that makes them stand out too much. Also, what I'm looking at now, which is the next to the boys club, I'm not sure how the basement level or first level, depending on your point of view, I'm not sure how that goes as well with everything else. I don't know in the part that looks like it's almost a separate orange or burnt sienna or whatever it is, the layout of the windows on the basement level, the fact that one may look like it's got blocks filling it, I'm not sure that's compatible with the rest of it. And when I look at the stone base on it, and I'm sure it's not real stone, it looks more like what people like to do with kitchens, the very vertical stuff. I'd love to see what it really looks like, because right now it's a lot of vertical fill, like the type of things that you see with the housing renovation. And I'd like to know what that material is, because that's what people are going to see when they walk on the sidewalk.
How do I say this?
Well, I think again, it's such a stark departure from what we saw before. I think it's a vast improvement. I think some of the exuberant nature of the wrapper could be toned down a bit, as Jack pointed out. I'm not troubled by the colors, but when you do SketchUp models or things of this nature, you don't have a real large palette to work with. And I think part of the process going forward, since this is concept at this level, is to look at materials, look at them on site next to the fire watch building, and make some decisions and judgments on that basis in the light of day to make some adjustments. But I think the massing of it works well. I'm not concerned with the height. I think you have gone to great lengths to reduce the apparent height of it, and stepping back the mass seems to work reasonably well or successfully. So and I like the entrance at the north end, as opposed to the hyphen, which was, although historically not an inappropriate way to connect to an existing historic building, it still had some issues associated with it. So creating that landscape zone between the back of the fire watch building and the new building creates a nice buffer and a separation. And the fire watch building is now allowed to stand distinctly and proud on its own in front of the building and not co-opted with it. So no, I think it's an excellent progression. And I think some level of restraint is probably in order moving forward with it, but I think it looks good.
Do we need to make a motion or anything for this?
No, this is just concept review.
Yeah.
So they'll be coming back hopefully soon for formal review.
They've done a good job. No question.
Yeah.
Matt or Michael, do you have any follow-up questions for the commission?
I don't. I think the feedback we've received has been pretty clear. We appreciate the positive comments on the work that we've done, and we look forward to coming back soon for a formal presentation for a certificate of appropriateness, so we can continue this project along.
Okay,
Aaron, I have a
bring
quick
physical materials along with you.
Yeah, I was actually, I had that question. I'm, assuming we come back in June or something like that, and we're still in the virtual setting, has there been any discussion on how you handle that materials, or so we can start trying to plan for that?
Right. I guess one of the things, would be providing the cut sheets. So if you do have material specifications picked out, if you could provide us with the cut sheet information specifying, the reveal and profile, any type, for stucco, if you have finish information, texture information, colors, it's going to all have to be, unfortunately, digital, as we have no way of distributing physical or being in some place where there's physical materials. So that would probably be the best way to move forward with that information, is to just provide, material specification cut forms, so cut sheets.
Okay.
Can we just say that that's if our lives continue as they are, because if in June or July or whenever we get this back, if we got the actual materials, there may be some other ways to safely look at them on site. So for now, yeah, Aaron, that was a good answer. But if and when things open up, and if we're still reviewing the project, it'd be nice to see the actual samples.
Sure.
We do have one person for comment. Are we okay with taking public comment at this time?
Yes, I believe so.
Ian, you should be all set.
Hi, Aaron. Can you hear me?
Yes.
First off, I want to say that I saw this project when it first came forth, and the alterations that have been made since then are a marked improvement, in my opinion. I live in the neighborhood at 134 Jefferson, and I'm very excited to see a use for this important historic building, as well as a vacant lot, and for this particular use. I did have one question. The renderings do not show a railing. However, at the very front stoop, the historic photos, as well as I believe the current structure, has a railing along either side of the entrance, the main entrance. I was wondering if that railing was going to be maintained and if the developer would be matching the historic railing design if it is not currently in on site. I honestly do not remember if there's a railing or not that's currently there. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just.
Just looking at the photo from Delaware Ave of the existing building, that railing is there. Our intent would be to leave it in place and refurbish it, or if it's beyond repair, replacing it in kind. I think it was just on the rendering, that fine a detail is a lot of work to put in.
You gave me a break.
I think in the original rehab scope of work too, that's attached to the packet, I think you do specify rotating and repairing that handrail.
So I'd ask that when you do come back, that we do get more information, elevation details, and much more information on the treatment, the actual treatment of the facades of the historic building. And we'll pick up the railing and other items there, kind of save you a separate trip. So we'll need that as well.
All right, well, this is all very encouraging, and we certainly look forward to the next time. Certainly with more detail, and hopefully we won't be virtual, but if we are, we'll deal with it.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Aaron, I believe you received some information that Marilyn had passed along and would like to just briefly discuss some of those items under the category of new business, if we're not obligated to make a motion at this point.
Nope. We can move on to new business. Let me 1 second. Pull this up real quick.
It was the 5-page additional info packet.
Additional info, yes. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Can I speak a bit while you're
Yes,
pulling?
go ahead. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Yes.
No,
Karen.
don't be sorry. Thank you. I was very much excited and heartened and disheartened and all sorts of things after last week's or the last presentation we had on the vacant buildings. And I spent some time going back into the preservation plan to pull out what it told us about vacant and buildings in demolition. I would recommend that we don't spend a lot of time on this now. It's really late, but I have two pieces that I want to show you. This is one, it's just 2 pages long. This is essentially verbatim right out of the preservation plan. So I would argue that the ongoing loss of buildings is one of the most critical issues that we can and should be dealing with. I also understand from the presentation a couple weeks ago, and certainly from Amanda, that it's too big for any one entity to take on. It really requires all of us. And I guess the question is how the commission wants to do any follow-up to that very that discussion. So this comes right out of the preservation plan, and I've made it pretty, you scroll to the next page, I've made it pretty easy, I think, to just follow what it was they told us and that was agreed to. So that's one question is I have this extraction from the preservation plan and want to know if the commission wants me or others to kind of do more work with that. So then and Aaron, I'll take the other one now. Then I had so much about vacant buildings and emergency demo that in my mind that I wanted to write something about it. And I would ask if you'll just look at this really quickly now. It's essentially my own statement as to what are we going to do with these buildings? And I believe that as we go into a post-COVID recovery, that we're not going to get developers coming in over the next 10 years, bringing us 100 units and all sorts of new construction and big projects. I think that the strength will be kind of the one-offs and building by building. So again, it's too late to really speak to this in great detail, but it kind of summarizes my own concept of, well, what can we do? I mean, the city said a couple weeks ago, okay, one of those last slides was, we need your help. So to some degree, I've talked to a bunch of people. As you know, I went into the preservation plan, summarized it, and probably those 4 items at the bottom, when you get past the damage that we are part of letting happen by not being more effective, if I may, is that early intervention is very critical. And I talked to Rick LaJoy and I've talked to others, and I think I've got some constructive ideas as to how some improvement could occur. The second is some of the expanded tools for dealing with building deficiencies and code violations. So that's both about education and advocating them potentially as they go into the city court system. The third is, I think we have such a terribly bifurcated system that to try to navigate the land bank and maybe funds here and maybe funds there, and what about the tax credit, and what about the housing trust funds that could be available through West Hill or South End? If we had a single entity within the city that really was the advocate for those single property owners and led them through the process, I think that would be a tremendous advantage. I heard that possibly something like that was happening with the Harvard Bloomberg funds that came to the city, but I don't know any details about that. And then the fourth item here is really saying we have to do this together. And I know that there was a series of meetings that Kara filled me in on a number of years ago. I don't know if Kara's still on the phone. And a lot of people got together and spoke to this very issue. And so I think this is more than the city alone can do. I think it's more than the commission can do. I think it's more than Historic Albany can do, but there's money there. There's people and there's money and there's resources. And we heard the building department say, yeah, we want to take this issue on. So to some degree, this is a very quick summary that I prepared coming out of my own head as to the importance of becoming engaged and starting a roadmap as to what we might be able to participate in or encourage. Kara's note said solutions to vacant buildings was the committee. That was it. And I think they met for quite a number of years and some very, very good work was coming out of that. So it's late. We do or don't need to talk about this. I've just had it on my mind and wanted to write down my thoughts. And but there's nothing here that essentially is not coming out of the preservation plan. I think I've taken it one step further in this very crude draft. So that's it.
Thank you.
No, this is all very helpful to have it all kind of summarized in one place for us to refer to and develop action plans to move forward with aspects of it. So, I look forward to further development and conversation over this.
I mean, the goal would be that there's enough understanding and trust and clarity that when we get a request like through 33 Alexander, we're not back because we all haven't solved the problem or even engaged in conversations to solve them. So that's, poor Amanda, it's one little building there and she gets, she just gets the everybody's concern and frustration, but it deserves it. It's an important building and we keep, it's not, I mean, it's not like the one we were just looking at, but every single building, and the more we leave, the more we lose, the less we have. I think that, and kind of buried in here, and be interesting. Well, again, I'll just say this and then we'll be done for tonight. I think the ability to get homeowners and individual property owners engaged in these properties is essential. That's what happened in Center Square. That's what happened in the mansions. I actually do think there's a correlation between the gross demolition, the grand amounts of demolition that came through urban renewal, and then the reaction to that, like, oh my gosh, what did we do? And I think that's in essence what we're seeing without being organized around these issues of how to impact that cycle, that we're just losing more and more. And it's very, very short-sighted. And we have lots of people in the city of Albany that need housing of all sorts. And not everybody's going to afford $1,500 a month apartments. And not everyone deserves really good housing, but at a minimum, if we can create some opportunities to have a diversity of housing and housing that people can afford with good guidance to become invested in, then that's really, really important. And even if it's negative cash flow in the beginning, if we all can do our work better over time, that's an asset for them. And by only waiting for the bigger developers to do it, we're losing the opportunity for people to really get stake in and invest in their neighborhoods. So I guess that's why I think this is so important. Okay, done.
Right on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for this virtual meeting and exciting discussion. Does anyone else have anything to offer before we entertain a motion to adjourn?
One thing on the new business, there was a fire on Broad Street. I think it was 46 Broad Street or something close to that. And somewhat of an attractive building, and it was announced it would be demolished. Have photographs been taken? Has there been anything that came out of that that's been sent to us?
I did receive the notice yesterday or today that there was going to be the demolition, but I have not received the structural report yet. So I am supposed to be added to that list for structural reports for buildings in historic districts.
And proper
But
photographs, I would hope.
Yeah.
Proper photographs as much as is possible without endangering someone.
right. So when I do get that, I will try to share that with the commission.
Have we formalized this, Aaron? We should probably formalize whatever. I know we were on the trajectory to do that. Everyone's on board, I think.
The last meeting, John had provided me with pretty much the final draft of the letter that he had written up after the commission had their meeting on the emergency demolition notification process.
Yeah.
And I did provide it to Chris. So I think, that draft is,
We'll touch base with
Yeah,
Chris and make sure
with
that
Chris.
moving. I mean, things have been a little bit out of sorts lately, as everyone knows. And then, Aaron, if we are getting notice, and usually we do hear chatter around the office, if nothing else, that there's going to be a demo, maybe you should try and, at least for the immediate term, put it on your schedule to go down and snap some pictures. Any guidance from the commission members as to what we should be photographing. Obviously, it's limited to what we have access to, but exterior sides to the extent that they're accessible, and anything else you guys want to forward along.
Well, I think that's great that we can get Aaron to do that, but somebody's making an awful lot of money. It's usually $40,000 to demolish a building. I would think that when they send the bill, they should provide the photographs that we need anyway.
That's probably a best practice, and we can work on that. In the immediate term, probably easier to get Aaron out there to do it. But I your point, I catch your point. And there's frankly a few things we've been trying to get them to include in those demolition contracts that go beyond just demolishing the building. So we'll make a point to add that to the list. Chris Hacker's going to buy that building on Alexander Street, isn't he?
What? Maybe.
He's going to do the work anyways.
I'm gonna go into 144 4th Street and we'll see what we can do with that. But to me, it's really, we talk about pecking off these buildings and losing these buildings. How can we redevelop, rebirth of the South End? I know Marilyn touched about it in the bigger plan. We're kind of all kicking around the same ball, but yeah, we need a plan.
We need more of you, Chris.
What?
more people to pay you.
And I put out that we need the community's support. So the only community member we heard from tonight was somebody who wanted to see the building down. So I think.
How do we turn that around?
That has been the consensus in the South End lately, in particular.
Yeah.
And I think it's just time. It's been so long. Their initial objective in the original South End plan was to, restore as much as they could, but kind of what they said to me is they're tired of waiting. So I don't know what that means for all of us, obviously, but something that's always in the back of elected officials' minds, I think, when they approach these sort of decisions. So it's an important consideration.
Well, the new construction, 15 years ago, the investment that the Housing Authority made with new construction, it's great, but that didn't lead to any vacant buildings getting rehabbed. So new construction is not going to do it. It's got to be the rehab, which is what concerns me about some of the development proposals I'm seeing. Is really it's heavily new construction focused. So
I
it's,
don't think that it's asking a lot for people to envision looking at images of, say, 33 Alexander to say this can be rehabbed. And so somehow we need to get some projects done so that it's not just a bunch of words, but people can, we can put together the mechanics, understand the mechanics. They're hard. They're not easy projects. I certainly agree. But if we believe they can be done, and maybe that's the question, then we have to figure out how to get a handful done so that they look real. People are appropriately frustrated, but if it can be done, and I think it can, I just think, as I said, it's a collaborative, serious effort, and that they're demonstration projects to some degree. Maybe that's a different way of starting to think about them, so that we're not asking people to envision what might be.
I agree.
Okay.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Moved.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Night, be safe.
Bye-bye. So Aaron, can you publish the chat line here? And I just opened it up and looked at a whole bunch of things.
Yeah, I don't know.